Hello, everybody. My name is Robert. I am a self-regulating adult, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Cult to Parent Fellow Traveler podcast, Healing Ancestral Trauma with Walla. Welcome. So before we get started, I'd like to review today's program. So there may be some of you today that are new to Cult to Parent, and so I have a very brief overview of Cult to Parent, what it is, and the details about that. And then I'm going to introduce Miss Walla, and we're going to have a conversation. She's also going to talk about the details of ancestral trauma, and excitingly enough, we're going to have also a guided visualization about that. And so Raj is our tech host, and you should be able to send him a message. And I would encourage you to send a message only if you have a technical challenge. Also regarding questions and answers, we're going to do those live today. So there won't be any monitoring of the chat itself. So if you do have questions, I'd encourage you to write them down because, again, we will not be checking the chat. And also at the end, we will have how to get a hold of Miss Walla. So if you're new to Cult to Parent, what is it? So Cult to Parent is a safe and supportive community of travelers inside the ACA Fellowship who share a common commitment to heal childhood trauma. There is something called the Cult to Parent parenting regime, which is a collection of in-body practices based on the inner child, inner parent metaphor that is designed to enable and accelerate transforming childhood trauma into wholeness and self-regulating adulthood. And that material goes beyond the ACA 12 steps in the ACA literature. Also, this parenting framework and practices are presented in a series of freely available workshops, meetings, and podcasts on the Cult to Parent website, which I'll show you in just a second. And so this podcast series, the Cult to Parent podcast, Fellow Traveler podcast series, invites prominent neurological scientists, trauma treatment pioneers, and other trauma and healing practitioners to share and educate us in this community on how to deepen and strengthen our journey from suffering into wholeness. And so here is the Cult to Parent website where all this is made available. This will be posted into chat. And if you go to the website, you've got the navigation bar up at the top. And there are workshops, there are meetings, weekly meetings, there are upcoming events, past events, etc. So if you're interested in Cult to Parent and you're new to it, then you'll have ready access. So without that, after saying that, it's my pleasure to introduce Walla. So Walla is a grief doula, culture builder, and tender of the old medicine ways. Her work weaves ancestral healing with grief work, all rooted in deep relationship and co-regulation with the animate world around us. As we work with ancient grandmothers and grandfathers along our own lineages to reparent and re-elder us, all people, no matter what our heritage, can restore our birthright and connection to Earth. So with that, I'd like to introduce Miss Walla. Welcome. Wow, that's quite a powerful. So let's you. Thank you for coming. That's a perfect.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
Thank you for coming, because this is an area, and I won't go into my stuff too much, but this is an area I've never really looked into thoughtfully. And so in meeting and talking with you, I'm really excited about this journey, and not only for myself, but those in this community. So I'm going to start off with a simple question, because it was curious when I first heard it. What is a doula?
Oh, a doula. Oh, some people might be familiar with that term to refer to, it's something like a midwife. It's not exactly a midwife, because the midwife is there for the baby, but the doula is there for the mother to kind of help that process of birthing the baby into the world.
What a great name.
And when I think of myself as a grief doula rather than a birth doula, I'm a grief doula because we live in this terrain, as we all know, of well, at least in here in North America where I live, it's a terrain of mandatory cheerfulness and, always put on a happy face and, stiff upper lip. That type of philosophy is just rampant.
Yeah.
And so it can be hard to access our grief. We've pathologized grief, and there's not really that permission. So hence my my role as a grief doula to help usher that into the world when people need that, which is a lot of people these days. Yeah.
Yeah, I can vouch for that myself personally. So
Mhm.
so it would be helpful, I think, for the community to get kind of a sense of your journey, kind of your own trauma work, your inner work, and then I'll ask maybe a couple of questions of how that kind of evolved into your current practice.
Sure. That
So
sounds
tell
good.
us a little bit about your trauma work.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to know how I got into this? Is that your
Well, yeah, but sorry. Um, so these folks, at least the ones that are in the community, they all are aware of, have embraced their childhood developmental trauma. So the work tends to be personal work on self. And my guess is in our conversation is that you had those experiences yourself, which evolved into this work. So could maybe give it a little bit of sense of your personal trauma journey and maybe some of your
Mm,
work.
right? Yeah. A big part of my trauma journey is that I blocked most of it out. And only in my much later in my adult life did I start to realize that the amount of tension and anxiety that was just ever present in my life was due to ongoing violence in my household, which I just magically didn't remember. And I actually still don't remember it, to be honest.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, have done a lot of work to recover childhood memories, and I at this point I'm just assuming that my body is wise to not have conscious memories of those. I've heard the stories enough from my mother and my brother, so I I know that a lot was happening and was going on in my home, my childhood home, all throughout my life, mostly with a father who also had alcoholic parents himself and had a really violent household. And on my mother's side, my mother grew up kind of on the streets of the Bronx because her mother was so traumatized from running from the Nazis that she wasn't able to care for her children. So my mother grew up very, very, very neglected and ran into all kinds of problems on the streets. So yeah, I come from refugee people, and there's a lot of violence and alcoholism in those homes, which then made its way into my childhood home.
Yeah.
So
So,
I'm sure that's a similar story to many of you. Yeah.
yeah. So then how did that, when did you become, what is ancestral trauma and how did that come into your experiences and awareness?
Yeah, that's an important question. I would say when I got old enough to move out of my house, I wanted to leave and go as far away as I possibly could. And so even though I grew up in New York, I actually live on a small island north of Seattle. So I did. I moved as far away from as I could. I even tried to move to Alaska at one point. I wanted to live out in the woods and just completely drop out of society. And that was not to be for many reasons because it's not my destiny. But
Okay.
um But when I got to this land where I live, where I am there right now, and I'm surrounded by forest, I finally was able to collapse on the forest floor and just put my arms around this big maple tree. And I think I cried for real, like really cried, really started grieving for probably the first time in my life, because I felt safe to do that, because I was alone in the forest. Not alone though, because I had all the trees and the birds and the soils and the clouds. I felt safe to finally start unburdening. And so much grief came over me at that time. I thought, eventually, after months and months of grieving, I thought, this cannot be
That's yours.
only from my childhood.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me that I had not really acknowledged my ancestors, that yes, my ancestors had a life and their lives had an impact on me, that I was carrying ancestral burdens. So our childhood trauma actually goes way beyond our own lifetime. And the epigenetic research that's been done at this point in modern science does confirm that that is indeed transmitted to us, that trauma does move through the lineage.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of us in this community came through traditional 12-step recovery. And so, it's alcoholism or other maladaptive behaviors to feel better that become problematic or very common with us. But I don't know about the community. I guess we'll find out. Because my parents were dysregulated, and I didn't realize that till I sorted out my own trauma. I never really, I thought looking backward was like, it's like it would only get worse. So it's a concept. So what you're talking about is really powerful. But I have two questions. One is, how long ago did you actually hug the tree, and what prompted you to do that? And you just did it and it happened. So it may be divinely inspired, but how long ago did that really happen, roughly?
Well, I had this I would call it a voice in my head, or a drive that was saying, get land, get land, get land, which was odd because I grew up in Queens. I didn't have any gardening, or it's not like I grew up on a farm. I didn't know what get land would possibly mean, but I just knew somehow that I needed to have peace and nature around me I just needed that. And so I was pretty set on finding land. And I I was running as fast as I could away from my childhood home, as I said. But that was in 1999. So that's basically 25 years ago that I arrived on this land. And there was a
Oh,
whole journey. I sailed to Alaska before that looking for the right land, and I ended up here. So there was a 2 years journey on a boat to get here. Yeah. But that
wow.
was a long time ago, and I've been homesteading and really working with soil and plants, and that is very, very therapeutic.
Wow. So, talk a little bit about, so we're going to be gifted today with you doing a short visualization, a guided visualization. And can you talk a little bit about the idea of ancestral and healing arts and rituals? Like, so it sounds like you had this major transformation, and you talked about your destiny. And when you look, because I'm curious, because I've had a similar experience, but I don't want to go there. But when you look at the word destiny, does that go, in other words, my guess is that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Well, I'm always refining exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I think that's a lifelong honing process, and having ancestral guidance, meaning having a communication line or multiple lines open with your well and wise ancestral guides is a really important way to keep on the path that you're supposed to be walking, because your ancestors are deeply invested
Yes,
in
that's fascinating
in
to me.
you living your actual destiny, because so many of us get diverted from from delivering our true gifts and our true purpose for being here. This is our one precious life that we get. And so our ancestors are deeply invested in having us make the most of that life. So I would say I'm always in a process of honing that. But I kept wanting to just run away as far as I could, as deep as I could into the woods. But yet I am a Leo. I've also been have a long history of performance. I am comfortable speaking in front of other people. I'm a writer. So it wasn't meant to be for me to become a monk and just completely drop out of society. There's something about translating the world of ritual and soils and communing with the animate powers, the living beings that are all around us in this world. So translating, and our ancestors are one of these, non-human, unseen beings, right? Are our own ancestors. So to translate their messages to regular people is part of my role, because I can do that. So they weren't going to have me just completely drop out, So every time I tried to do that, I was washed back on shore.
So you're of service to humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel everything I do is oriented towards service, and that's my prayer every day, that this will be of service. I pray that this session will be of service to you all as well.
Amen. So I don't want to get into, so you're going to actually share some details about your work with some slides, but so I don't want to encroach on that, but the thing that when you and I talk, because my history with my ancestors is very almost my my awareness of it. I know it's there now, but so what also drew me to you was this idea that in anyone's lineage, my lineage or anyone else's, and because I've got history of dysregulation, at least currently, that there's an ancestor in my lineage who is not dysregulated and is actually there for me to engage with. So how does that work? I should say, it's kind of a weird thing. What was your experience?
Are you saying that you have that relationship established with someone, or that you are looking for that?
No, no. I have it, but I never, and you and I talked about this. I had a divine version of me sent to me.
Mm.
And in my mantras and conversations with that entity, he claimed that he goes all the way back to the beginning of time, and
Right.
that he's passed through all my ancestors. So
Right.
but I never really thought much about that until you and I met.
Right.
So, but I don't know if well, my experience is really separate from this, but so in your case, in after you had these kind of transformative experiences and then you started connecting with your ancestors, how did that occur? Is in meditation, or the voices just come when they come, kind of a thing? And do I have to be aware of my ancestors to
Mm.
I assume I don't, to appreciate and get in touch with them?
Right. Well, truly, we are made of nothing but our ancestors. Where, if you think about how many ancestors we have thousands and thousands and thousands of generations. Human beings have been on this planet for a very long time. the date of how old we are keeps getting pushed farther and farther back too, as they keep making new discoveries. So we're in the millions of years at this point old,
Okay.
say the various Homo human species, which means we have a lot of ancestors. And so our lifetime is, even the last 10,000 years is maybe less than 1% of human history. So we have so many well ancestors. I mean, you're talking about a version of an ancestor that appeared to you that has run through time.
Yeah.
That is the essence of your lineage coming through.
Okay.
So the way that I work, rather than connecting with an individual ancestor, it's more like you're communing with a collective pool of wellness that is the reason that you're even alive. You
Wow.
know,
That's I got goosebumps you saying that.
you would have died out long time ago if you didn't have an incredible amount of resilience and strength and kindness and really good hunters and really wonderful singers and adaptive basket weavers and all the things that we've needed to survive as humans, being really smart and strong and fast and sly and loving and wise and kind. And so there are places in our lineages where there were kinks in the cord, things, times when our ancestors have struggled, but it's actually not the majority of our lineage. And this is what people don't realize, because we
That's
have so much trauma, we just
yeah.
block our lineage off entirely.
Right.
But that's blocking off so much of our resources, because most of our lineage is quite well. And that's what when we work with ancestral healing, we work on connecting with that collective. It's like an aquifer that you can tap into of wisdom and wellness and love.
Wow. So I'm going to ask one more question because I was fascinated, even though I've had when I introduced you and I read it, one of the words really stuck out to me because to me, it's another dimension. So in this community, we talk about parenting or reparenting. You talked about re-eldering.
Right.
So can you just speak briefly about that, and then we'll shift gears and you can actually go into detail about your work.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll probably get to more of that in the slideshow as
Okay.
well. But when we think of connecting with our ancestors, what my experience has been is that a grandmother figure will come in, right? Or a grandfather figure. And many of us didn't have, not only were we not properly parented, but we weren't properly grandparented either. We weren't grandmothered, we weren't grandfathered. Like many of our grandparents, where were they when the abuse was happening, right? The family unit, the village structure that held humanity for most of our evolution. Like when I say most, I mean 99.9% of our evolution. We lived in a very tight-knit band or a village, and things wouldn't be able to fester behind closed doors the way they do now.
Yeah.
There would be many different types of elders, whether they were our blood relatives or not, that would step in when there was something going awry in our community.
Yeah.
So connecting with these ancient wise fountains of wisdom is really, it is our birthright. And we
Yeah.
need not only to reparent, but to have elders in our lives again. And we can. It's
Awesome.
actually not as it's not as hard as you would think. It's not as hard as our society would have us think. Our society would like us to believe that we're really disconnected and that you know,
Well,
that
also,
we don't have these capacities, you know, only a shaman or a you know, some type of clairvoyance or some type of special person can connect with their ancestors. It's just completely not true. It's actually, it is natural as breathing to connect with your own ancestors.
yeah, so that's so encouraging. So before we give the floor to Nala to talk a lot about her work, she does work with individuals and groups, and we can talk about that at the end. And at the end of today's session, we'll provide all the ways that you can get in touch with her and get access to her work. So with that, Raj, if you could set the stage for her to share her experience with her work.
Hey, can you all see that? I'm calling this presentation In the Arms of Grandmother. I love this picture of beautiful granny hands. In my life, I never had very much access to my grandparents. Some of my grandparents had died before I was even born. And then I didn't see my own grandmother very much, or my grandfather on my other side. So we all have this deep longing to belong to a family, and this is actually quite intrinsic to who we are as humans. We're a social creature. We evolved that way. We evolved to live in community, in a tribe, and in a village. And so this longing that we feel to belong and not be alone, not be isolated is part of who we are. We're not a solitary species. And I'm sure many of you feel that longing. And so we're going to talk about how the modern world, despite the fact that we are very atomized, like even right now, we're each in our individual Zoom box, we're each in our individual Zoom rectangle, we can get very isolated. And working with our own ancestors and feeling them circling around us does go a long way to fulfilling that longing to belong. Suddenly, all my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say. Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands of thousands. So there's this image that we have of an ancestor right behind us with their hands on our shoulders, and behind them another ancestor with their hands on their shoulders, and all the way back thousands and thousands and thousands of generations back. And this is just the truth, the fact of our being, is that we are the result of the love of thousands. All of us have wise and earth-connected ancestors. As I was saying earlier, if our ancestors were not, you know, really good hunters and strong and fast and sexy and fun and, you know, resilient, we wouldn't be here. So the fact that you're alive is a very good sign that you have earth-connected ancestors. It's not that, oh, well, someone else has some wise ancestors in their line, but I don't, because I have too much turmoil in my line. My ancestors are all messed up. You know, my ancestors are abusive, or my ancestors are this or that. Yeah, a few of them may have been. And maybe you have to go back, many generations to find those ancestors that were earth connected. But the truth is that no matter who you are, where you come from, you have ancestors somewhere that were indigenous and lived with earth connecting rituals. Their people had ceremony, for birth, for death, for grief. for everything else. And they lived that way, and we can get in touch with those ancestors. So I practice ancestral healing, and because we have that deep pool of wellness to tap into, and that it's our right to tap into it, it's our birthright, we also have a responsibility to connect with our ancestors. And that's the other side of the coin, because many of us are in kind of dereliction of that duty to connect. Most of our ancestors, they had conversations with their own, their own grandmothers and grandfathers, their ancestral guides every single day. It's just the most basic piece of kind of spiritual hygiene that you can do, is to be in dialogue with this sense of support and guidance that's very deep and very old. Some of us might call it our intuition, right? And I always used to pride myself on being a very intuitive person. And then at one point I started to laugh because I realized, oh, it's not, my intuition isn't mine. This is the wisdom of that accumulated through the generations of my ancestors coming out and saying, hey, I wouldn't do that if I were you. That voice, that voice that you hear is actually the voice of our ancestors. So there's that responsibility to listen. And if we all had that connection, cleaned and spiffy and shiny, that connection was flowing and alive, our world would look very, very different. So yeah, I'm going to talk about this. I lost my grandmother, this aspect of our language that we use around losing our loved ones, right? I lost my mother. I lost my grandfather last year. And one of my favorite teachers, some of you may know, Stephen Jenkinson, who teaches on grief and death. But he talks about, if you lost your keys or your wallet, you would look for it. you would turn up all the cushions on the couch, and you would retrace your steps, and you would just look everywhere. And if you couldn't find your keys or your wallet, you would berate yourself, like, how could I be so careless? I'll never let this happen again. You would make sure you wouldn't do that. And so losing our grandmothers and our grandfathers is not something that we should be doing. We're going to be finding our ancestors today. Yeah. And we already talked about this. Our existence proves that we have abundant wellness in our heritage. You, me, we all do. So the reality is that some of our ancestors struggled, some of them were abusive. Some of them may have been, involved in all kinds of horrific things, like the various inquisitions and genocides, the history of the last, few thousand years. Especially if you have any European heritage, there was a lot going on in Europe. The enclosures, the Inquisition, the Holy Roman Empire. So the Holy Roman Empire came and ripping all of our ancestors from their indigenous, land-connected, earth-oriented lives. So there is a lot of trauma in our lineages that we can help from our vantage point here as the living person to heal. The dead actually change a lot easier and a lot faster than we do. So in seeking back to our very wise, ancient, that aquifer of wellness that I'm talking about. And then we bring that forward. We actually help free the ancestors that were traumatized from that state, and that they actually can change. We actually can heal the past. And when we do that ancestral healing, it works forwards and backwards in time. It kind of emanates from what we're doing here. And that's why the living people doing ancestral healing is so important, because we're the ones with hands and ears and eyes, and we can actually affect change in this world. So us engaging in this healing process is important for freeing our ancestors, as well as healing ourselves and making sure that the traumas don't get passed on. So you're healing both the past and the future when you do this ancestral healing and reparenting work, re-eldering work, as we were talking about before. So the way that we do that is with the power of our imagination. So we're going to be doing what's usually called a guided visualization, but my teacher Josh Fry talks about a different term that he uses for that, and it's more like imaginal architecture. Imaginal architecture, where we're constructing images in our mind's eye, using this gift of imagination and learning to flex that muscle again, because our society tells you, oh, your imagination is just fantasy, it's not real. Or if you have a vision, oh, it's just a projection, or it's of your psyche, it's not it doesn't have any effect, it's not real. And that is completely not true. Our imaginations and our imaginal muscles are the most, it might be considered the most important skill or gift of a human being. This is what we have when we don't have a whole lot that we give. Like plants they have a superpower of being able to create sugars, create food just by drinking in the sun. You know, plants are amazing and they feed the whole world. We don't have that superpower, but we do have our imaginations, and so we're going to be using them today. So we're healing our attachment, and I think a lot of you are already doing this work with reparenting. So we're not only healing our attachment, our own attachment wounds, but we're healing our attachment to the earth in working with our ancestors, and we're healing our attachment to our ancestral body, not just our own bodies. We're healing the ancestral body, because though, you know, trauma does go through, it is transmitted intergenerationally, but so is resilience. And that's what we tend to forget. So we don't want to throw the baby out the bathwater and say, oh, well, my ancestors they're just irredeemable. You know, they were too abusive. Well, there's ways we go around, we start at the far end of the lineage where there's a lot of resilience, and then we work forward in time. But we don't let an abusive ancestor block us from from accessing our entire lineage. So we're reclaiming that sense of kinship and that longing to belong, right? And we're building relationship with our ancestors, not the ones who are fragmented and chaotic and you know, malevolent, or they're stuck in some type of trauma vortex. Those aren't the ones we start with. What we do is we build relationship with the ancestors they're loving and they're kind and they're wise, and they have a lot to offer us, like Robert was describing before. So you probably know a little bit about trauma healing. A lot has been learned about trauma healing in the last 50, 60 years. We know that we have to establish safety first and foremost. Like if you're in an abusive relationship, you have to get out of that relationship and reestablish some type of stable life and protection. And then there's a process of remembrance and mourning where we tell our story to people who are empathetic and they're listening. And then we reconnect and reestablish healthy relationships and healthy community. So all of these things are the benefits of reestablishing relationship with your well ancestors. We gather them around us to establish a ring of protection around us. I'm talking about right now about some of the basics of ritual, is that we establish protection around us, and we tell them the story. They speak to us, they witness us, what we've gone through, and then we start building a relationship with them. And feeling that community of ancestral wisdom around us is very healing of our trauma and the trauma of our ancestors. So in working with the ancestral body, there's going to be some grief that we encounter. And so becoming literate with grieving is part of the process. It's not time to close the door on our grief and keep shoving it down and that type of thing. We are working with our grief, acknowledging grief as a skill, like grief as a verb. Grieving is more what we become more skilled at doing rather than just shoving it away. And so grief work goes hand in hand with ancestor work and vice versa. And our ancestors bear witness to the grief that we hold, and that's very helpful. So we're cultivating grief literacy here as part of the ancestral work. And that work is very somatic. I don't know how familiar you all are with that term, but so your soma is basically your body, but it's your experience of your own body from the inside. So you are the only person who knows what your inner experience is, what your somatic experience is. And so all of this communication with ancestors and grieving is done with a lot of awareness of our sensation. It's very grounded in the body and what our body is feeling, and using our body as a guide, our soma as a guide. So have you ever had that experience where you cry and it's you're not sure if you're crying or laughing at some point? You're fully engaged in the alchemy where your tears and your laughter are joined. And so there's a sweet spot there where it's transformative type of grief, where you're not just getting stuck in self-blame or depression or wallowing. Grief is a skill. It's not synonymous with sorrow or depression. It's actually something that we, all to be in a human life is to experience grief and trauma. So that's not something we can ever avoid. And grief is not a punishment for something. It's a way of moving trauma through the body. So we need to depathologize grieving and deprivatize it, because sharing it with others is part of how it's healed. And in this case, we're talking about sharing with our ancestors. I just wanted to give a shout out to professional whalers, because for most of humanity, most of our history rather, there were professional wailers in every community, people who were especially good at lamentation, at crying. Many of you might be one of those people that where your tears come easily, and other people feel really frozen up with their tears. So they would deliberately invite professional wailers and lamenters to the various festivals and gatherings to get a wailing going. And many cultures had this idea that if you weren't, weeping and then laughing and dancing, and you didn't have that full experience of grief and joy and the two intertwining in that alchemical way, that it wasn't really a party. It wasn't really a true festival. So just acknowledging the legitimate role that earth honoring cultures have around the world for professional wailing, like this Karelian lamentation, and Irish keening is a good example, the wailing women for the Jews, and there's countless examples. Robert, you were asking me before about ritual, and the way that I engage with the way that I've learned to engage with ancestral healing is actually a ritual process. It's not, doesn't need to be an elaborate ritual, or it could be, but there's ways to create a container around a ritual space and then be able to go in and communicate with your ancestors and then come back out of that ritual space. And it's a ritual is a technology that humans have engaged in since our very beginnings. And it's something that we're working to reclaim. So this is a quote from Malidoma Somé, who is a very he's well known for bringing grief ritual to North America from Africa. His elders sent him off to say that, I think those people over in America have some problems grieving. You need to bring this grief ritual over there. And he did. And now there's so many people that are Malidoma and his wife Sabon Fu's students that are have brought this beautiful African, West African Dagara ritual, communal grief ritual to North America. So I can't really see this slide, unfortunately, to read it, but he's basically saying it's a very safe and effective tool to maintain the communication and the balance between body and soul and binding a community together. So if you look deeply into the palm of your hand, you will see your parents and all generations of your ancestors. All of them are alive in this moment. Each is present in your body, and you are the continuation of each of these people. That's a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, who died just a couple of years ago. Thank you, Thich Nhat Hanh. Thank you, grandmothers. Thank you, grandmothers. Thank you, grandmothers. Good. Yeah, so that's my presentation, and I would like to, if I may, lead you all into a...
Nala,
Yes.
before we do that, let's maybe have a couple of questions about what you shared, and then
Oh, yes.
then we'll do that. So that was awesome. I so appreciate you and your work. Oh, thank you. So we have time for some questions. And if you have a question for Nala, raise your virtual hand. And I would encourage you, because we have some other things to do, that we're going to do this maybe for 10 minutes or so. And then we're going to do the visualization. And then people can share their experience and also ask questions. So if anybody has any questions, this is the time to raise your virtual hand.
Yeah. Yeah, if
Ellie,
you have any questions.
Eliana.
Hello. You're muted.
Uh, we're sending you unmute buttons. There you go.
All right, so I'm here. So my question is I was drawn to this originally when I heard about it, and I am one of those people who doesn't feel like I have, great connection with my ancestors, but I can feel the resonance and the draw for this type of experience. And I've had trouble with tears and grieving. And so if I were to engage you on a one-on-one process for a session, would you help me get in touch with those ancestors who had the lineage, as well as help me grieve, cry, and release some of that I'm have difficulty doing? My body tends to titrate my tears because it's been it's had some autoimmune challenges. And so
Right.
instead of wiping me out, it'll come up in little spots, regardless of healing. But it kind of feels like there's a whole lot there, just like there's a whole lot of anger that would be nice to kind of bring through. And I know anger is a secondary emotion, so fear is its baseline. But I kind of think if I could get in touch with the grief, it might give more room for the other that's been sort of stuck or bypassed. I've kind of
Yeah.
gone back to the fear,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I work with people on both of those all the time. And I think our rage is part of the grieving process. It's, grief isn't just sadness. It's rage, it's despair, it's elation, actually. When if we're grieving regularly and it's like a fluid, it's a liquid. It literally is tears and snot. There's a fluid quality to grief. And so allowing it to flow. Like I'm an advocate for grieving on a daily basis, just a little bit, right? You can't just have a full-on meltdown every single day, but to have a practice where you are able to release a little bit each day, or each week, or however it works for each individual is different. But having a regular practice where you deliberately touch into your grief is really, really important, especially in this day and age when there's so many grievous events happening constantly, and the grief is just like incoming.
I guess what I'm asking is,
Yeah.
if I did a session with you, would you sort of be my surrogate to help unlock that kind of potential grief so that I might have access to working with it in a way that I could work with it, my body
Yeah.
at a three-dimensional level could handle
Yeah. Yep.
within
That's
a session.
what I do. And we
Just want to make
use the ancestral lineage healing process as a container for that, so that you have your wise ancestors show up into the space, and they're kind of holding a protection around you so that you can actually like let your guard down and be able to feel some of these things, because we're just running through this world so alone, and we feel like we have to always keep everything buttoned up. So our ancestors hold that role so that we can just release a little bit and let go. So, it's a process to work on. So, I welcome you can get in touch with me, and we can talk more about this one-on-one.
great. Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have time for another question, or?
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment. I love your yurt. It's just beautiful. It's always been my dream to live in one, and it looks like you're living my dream. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Okay.
So Nala, I have a question that occurred to me. Yeah, so we've got a bunch of hands now. We're not going to be able to handle these right now, but we'll be able to do them after the visualization. So I'm involved with a very close person who is terminally ill. And I just found out about a week ago. And for reasons that aren't worth talking about, this person isn't, and we know each other very well, actually. And our relationship was broken. And that's while I was doing my work. And so I'm curious if this person has ancestors as well, and she's not open to letting people in as she passes. And I don't want to, it's kind of a weird question, but can work be done with other people's ancestors?
Well, yes, they can. I'm not the person that does that, right? You would talk to people who do more of shamanic practice to get in touch with other people's ancestors,
Okay.
right? But that being said, what you can do is this is kind of a complex like theological question in some ways. So I don't know, it's kind of beyond the scope of this, but we're all connected somewhere back there. So you can work through your own ancestral lines to actually send this person loving kindness and support and compassion to them. It's different than getting really involved in tinkering with their ancestors, but you can always send benevolence towards someone. That's always possible and probably needed and welcome at this for your friend. So
wow, thank you. So I think we do have time for maybe one more question, maybe two, if the first one is short. Aya.
Thank you, Robert. Hi, Nala. Thank you. It's really nice to hear you. I started to weep when you thanked the grandmothers at the end. I do identify that I'm doing already this journey, and as you said, I feel I've been called to go back to my Celtic ancestors. My question is, I have an intuition that I never shared with anyone, but it's a question that I will be able to have beautiful, long, deep conversation with my biological mother once she passed away. Now I can't. And is this something that you also, I don't know if, I'm just asking if you ever had someone with the same, or I'm just sharing it and asking if this, I know it will happen. Ancestor could be my mom also when, I don't know. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm a bit emotional. My mom is alive.
Your mom is alive.
We can't talk. We can't.
Right.
We feel the love, but we can't have conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do have quite a few people who can't communicate with their ancestors, either because the person has dementia, or the person they're estranged, or they're far away. For some reason, they're not in connection. So the way that I tend to work, it's similar to what we were just speaking about with Robert, is that you go back in your lineage and you ask for your wise ancestors to support the communication with someone like your mom or other relatives. There are many ancestors, not only living, but also, people who are somewhat recently deceased, say within a year or within the 5 years. And when someone dies, their pretty busy actually trying to move into the ancestral terrain, to leave this world and to kind of transfer, you know, over to the ancestral terrain. And so it's customary in many cultures that we don't even speak with the recently deceased for at least a year. We don't try and contact them because they're kind of busy, you know, and that's also the case for people who are nearing death. Like there's, in many ways, they need their space. So we can work and still be sending them all kinds of support and loving kindness through this reconnection with the wisdom in our lineages. So yeah, short
thank
answer
you.
for now, but bless you and your path and
Yeah.
that longing to connect, that longing to belong. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Aya. Yeah, and so we have two hands up, LL and Shava. We're gonna actually shift gears, and Nala's gonna do a guided visualization. So if you could please put your hands down, but there'll be time for additional questions after that. And Nala, we talked about, is there any special things you want to do before you start, like videoing and stuff like that?
No, folks want to just get into a comfortable position. You can either be, you know, seated or you can lie down, you can move around. Sometimes it helps to have maybe a scarf that you can put over your eyes, something like that. Some people like to light a candle or whatever it is that helps you get into, like, just shift into a more of a non-ordinary space. We're just going to do a short imaginal architecture, as I'm calling it, for 5 or 10 minutes. So I will talk you through that. I'll start off with a little invocation or a prayer, otherwise known as a prayer. And then I will just talk you through this exercising of our imaginal muscle. So I brought this bell and I'll begin. Hopefully you can hear this nice bell, beautiful bell. Ah, ancient ones, oh ancient ones, oh wise ones, oh benevolent ones. You who are loving, you who are kind, you who are caring. I'm calling to you now, calling out to you, ancient ones, to please help us remember, you in these times of great forgetting, to help us remember who we are, to help us feel your arms around us, to feel your love, to feel your soft hands on our skin again, to feel this across the water of time. We long for you, ancestors. You have been here all along. I ask for your guidance today, that all who are gathered here, that we can somehow receive and hear and feel your wisdom coming through, and feel your kindness in service of healing our lineages, in service of remembering who we are on the deepest of levels, in service of healing this aching world, in service of repair. Tikkun olam. Tikkun olam. Thank you for these bodies. Thank you for these lives. Thank you for this precious time together that we have through the miracle of this technology. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is. We're just taking a moment here to use your breath to become present in your own skin. Really bringing your attention down from your mind and the busyness of the day and more into your heart, into your belly, your hips, being aware of the places where your body is touching the earth or the floor. And taking a moment to ask the places where you already feel in connection with a higher power. Maybe that's just loving kindness in general, or maybe it's the Mother Earth, or maybe it's a particular God or deity. Whoever it is that you look to as your higher power, ask them to help you right now. Use your imagination to put a layer of protection around you and your body and the space that you're in. It might be a sphere, an energized sphere, or it might be a cozy nest. However that looks to you. And notice where you feel that protection in place, when you know it's in place, where that registers in your body. For me, there's a settling that I feel in my heart. Kind of like a relax and a release of the tissues around my heart and my solar plexus. Yeah. And noticing that you can always come back to that place of holding and protection. And now imagining yourself at the center of a wheel or a compass. And that to your left is a long line of grandfathers that spirals out. And you can sense into that spiral and back into time, into the deep folds of time, not stopping in just the recent ancestors, but going all the way back to the beginning, to the deepest part of your ancestry, those grandfathers extending, spiraling to your left. The father of 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 the grandfather of the grandfather of the grandfather, all the way back. And they can even curve around your space to add to that layer of protection. And the same for your right side, your grandmothers. Imagining the longest line, all perhaps holding hands, spiraling through time, the mother of the mother of the mother of the mother, and not stopping in the recent times, but going all the way back, allowing your mind's eye or your sensation to experience that spiraling back, that you're connected all the way to the beginning, the foundations. And now it's taken such a long time for you to be in this moment in time, cultivating a relationship once again with these ancient ones. Ask now to receive from some benevolent and kind and wise and rooted an ancestor, either a grandfather or a grandmother from the ancient times, to send a blessing to you. Someone who is deeply invested in your healing and the healing of your lineages. Ask to receive that blessing and then take a moment to actually receive it. Notice where in your body you feel it land. Maybe it's a gift of something beautiful they see in you. Maybe it's the gift of feeling their presence, feeling their kind hands on your cheek. A cradling. Some type of blessing to receive. And then thank them. Thank them so much for this connection. And ask them for something that you could do in your life to keep this connection alive if you would enjoy that connection to continue. Ask them for something that you can do maybe after this call is over, or something you can do sometime in the next few days to keep this connection alive. And then thank them again. May you meet again, and returning yourself to that center of the wheel or compass where you started. Feeling that sense of the protectors, the grandfathers and the grandmothers, the higher power that protected this sphere or wheel or nest. Giving thanks for that, the opportunity. Thank you, dear ones. Thank you, wise ones. Thank you for this glimpse into remembering who you are and that we can connect with you. Thank you so much for this precious life, these precious bodies, this precious imagination that is the vehicle for us to relate to one another. Thank you for this relation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so it is. We come back, shifting your attention back into our Zoom group, back into your room, back into your ordinary consciousness. Maybe stretching and rubbing your hands together, clapping. Yeah, so there's some time if anyone would like to, if anyone's moved to share something that they experienced just now, that would be welcome. You can raise your hand as before, and we can probably use the last few minutes that we have together to talk about what you experienced and get to some of the questions that we didn't get to before. Does that sound right, Robert?
Sounds like a plan. So also, before we go, so we may run a little bit over the time. We'll wait and see. But also, before we leave, I will present to you how to get a hold of Nala in several different ways. So we'll end with that. So, but we do have several questions. That was very powerful, Nala. That's, yeah. Shava.
Is it Chava Malka?
Yes, it's Walla.
Whoops, my mistake.
Well, sometimes I feel like my ancestors are nudniks, it's like they're prodding me to do things and live this kind of life that celebrates life. Sometimes I just wish they'd mind their own business kind of thing. And so yeah, something like I have a zillion questions, but I guess one is about boundaries. And and trusting people who were now want to help me were pretty abusive, some of them. And so how do I develop a trust? I guess maybe like any human relationship, it takes time and bit by bit.
That's a really good a good place to start is boundaries, right? And what you pointed out is quite right, that making relationship with our ancestors is very much analogous to making relationship with living people, that it takes time to develop trust. You develop a vocabulary, you meet one another, kind of have exchanges, they ask things of you, you ask things of them. If both of you follow through, then the trust deepens. And in the case of making boundaries with ancestors that are really demanding or they're interfering with your life more, what normally I would do is to be seeking an ancestor that is a lot farther back, rather than making relationship with like your great grandmother or your deceased mother. For example, you would deliberately go much farther into the ancient time where you're tapping into a collective of very well ancestors, and then they're the ones that hold the boundary. I hope Chava is still here. I don't see her anymore, but yeah, to help you hold that boundary and to know that you do have that agency to say no. If your ancestors are demanding things of you, you can only do what you can do. And so you have you're empowered to make the boundaries that you need to make. Some people have that issue where there's so much ancestral communication that it's hard to parse it out. And others have the other end of the spectrum where they're having trouble making any connection. So we can work with either of those scenarios, and it's through making connection with a really deeply well and wise guide. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think we may have lost Chava, but
Yeah, she turned her video off. Oh, there she is. She's she's 2 thumbs up.
okay. Yeah. And feel free to get in touch with me more. I know you have a million questions and I love to answer lots of questions too. So yeah. So feel
Yeah,
free.
so we're going to take all the questions if Nala can wait, but at 25 after, I'm going to actually show how to get a hold of her. So some people scheduled to be here to that time. So I'm going to make sure everybody gets the contact information before we go. So Tammy.
I love that meditation. And it just brought me to tears. I was connecting with my grandfather, my dad's father, and when you said, feel their hand on your cheek, that was something that he often did with me. So I could just feel that when you said it, and it was just absolutely beautiful. So thank you.
That's so good to hear. That's beautiful that you got to really experience that in your physical life too. That's lucky.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome.
Joyce.
This is the first time I've been exposed to this. When I did the imagination, I had to like mentally go past like the civilized world of generation. And the individual I connected with was more childlike, sitting like by a stream or whatever. And she offered me a flower. And I was wondering, is that normal to have like a more younger person than an elder?
Yeah. It's very normal. Like I was describing there, once you're tapped into the aquifer of wellness, there's a whole lineage of people. So they show up wearing a particular visage or mask or a certain just presentation that is appropriate for that interaction. So they could show up as an elder or as a baby, they could show up as a raven. They could show up. There's just so many ways, and it all is within the realm of ancestral connection. So yeah, I don't doubt that they showed up in their childlike state today.
Yeah. So is it Johan or Yeah, I'm probably not saying it correctly. I'm 0 for 2.
It's Johan. Hi.
Hi, Johan.
I think my hand is over the camera. So, okay, I have no connection to my ancestors. And I did the meditation, and that felt really good. But I want to be able to start making connection with them. I know there's probably a lot of value in doing that and getting more connected with who I am. And I just want to know, where to start.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a book called Ancestral Medicine that I would recommend. By Daniel Four. I'm trying to type this into the chat. Let me see if I can do it. And that's a really good primer to begin, and obviously I can help guide you. I do do that for people all the time. But if you want to look at a book, and also that website has a lot of resources and probably can point you to some like videos or audios about connecting more deeply with your ancestors. Yeah. And then if you want to dive into that journey further, then working one-on-one with someone is a really great way to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm glad you had a good experience with it for your first time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And so before we take more questions, I would like to share this information, how to get a hold of Nala. So she has a website, which is called Be Well Now. And this link will be put into chat. And in addition to the website, she has a Patreon account. And so that link will be put into chat. And in addition to that, she has an Instagram account. Great photos, by the way. And that link will be put into chat as well. And also she has a Facebook account and I guess a Facebook group. And that information will be put into chat as well. And I think, do we have one more? Yeah, a YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
So you can get
I'm easy to find, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. Pick your choice.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. Yeah, we'll come back to that after the questions are done. So there's the information to get a hold of her. Now let's keep going. Lori.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation and your time. What I saw, like an ancestor, I saw two, and the first one sent me, a blessing, and I felt that in my heart as I'm healing from past trauma from within my family, and their energy seemed like, and I appreciated it, but their energy seemed, I couldn't recognize it because behind them was somebody whose energy was lighter. Theirs seemed like denser.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I still appreciated it. It was a blessing. But like I was, I think I was just afraid of like, I'm afraid I'm like working on trusting people again and trusting myself.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So, and just kind of accepting that the dysfunction was in my family and moving past it. But, yeah. One just seemed denser. The other one seemed super happy and lighter. It was further back.
Yeah, usually I err on going further back. And there's in order to find like a true guide who you would work with over and over again, you would ask, a certain series of questions Like, are you actually a guide on my lineage? Are we related, you know, and are you qualified? Are you willing and able to help with the healing on this lineage? Are you qualified to help with the healing on this lineage? And then you would confirm with yourself whether or not you're interested in working with this guide. And if there's any doubt at all, then we would keep on seeking until you found someone that felt fully benevolent and you felt very attracted to working with them. So these are the type of things that I, you know, guide people through step by step. And so when things come up, I'm able to guide you in real time, kind of like traveling with you as you're having these interactions, and I can kind of help make suggestions and kind of broker an exchange, because you're right, it is very, very important that be fully trusting relationship. And that's what we would work on, is developing that feeling of being held and trusting before we take any further steps forward. So I think you're on the right track.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Nala, we're at the hour. Are you able to stay a little longer?
Yeah, I'm happy to take the rest of these questions here.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Lori.
Gloria. Yeah, thank you, Lori. Gloria.
Thank you. First of all and foremost for me is I want to thank you. It's just supreme blessing. And I do communicate with my ancestors, but you gave me something new and something I'm excited and trying and going forward with. And that is, when I communicate, it's mostly an affirmation, a thank you to the ancestors, knowing that they guide me, knowing that they're there for me. But you said, ask them for something. And I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. And of course, you can ask them for something. And I feel it all over my body, just saying the words ask, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I look forward to, going to your website and continuing this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we have to ask, right? How is anything going to happen unless we ask? And oftentimes they've been waiting for generations for someone to please ask, you know. I have that experience all the time, where when people finally do meet an ancestral guide, they're like, what took you so long? Like, we're ready to get down to, you know, to healing. We're ready to get down to business here. Like, you know, because it's sad how many generations that of modern, you know, industrial life, where we've been told that our ancestors are gone or they're lost, or, you know, communicating with them is, you know, a relic of the past, or it's kind of like quaint and immature, and it's not scientific, and it's irrational, or all those things. And a lot of generations, or they were just too traumatized to even have time or to even bother, you know. So we've kind of come full circle, where many of us are going, wait, who are our ancestors? And is it true that they're gone or lost? Like, we're starting to question that. And so most of the time there's guides there that are like, thank you for coming. We've been waiting for generations for you. So please ask, right? Yeah. Thank you. Great. Martin, I think, is next.
Yeah, I was muted.
Thanks, Nala.
Hey.
Yeah, great experience. When I heard about this podcast, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, when I heard about this podcast probably a month ago, I had a visualization of an ancestor, and he seemed to come from my Scottish Irish lineage, and I kind of worked out maybe by the way he dressed, and maybe it was intuition that it was round about the 13th century. So when I did the visualization, a friend had sent me an image of the magician in tarot that was, which I'd never seen before, and it was based on a conversation we were having. But he seemed to be sitting above the universe as I saw it in my experience, and looking over it, and it was like the Milky Way. So that came up for me, and then when you guided the left, right, grandfathers, grandmothers, it was like I was sitting in the middle of the compass, and I was surrounded by mountains, and just these thousands of people just kept coming. And then what happened was this, he gave me, when I had this visualization a while ago, he gave me his name as well, which was Arthur.
Beautiful.
And he came out of the group from way back, and he came towards me. And then when you said the grandmothers, his wife came out from the other side. And the name that for some reason it came to me was Mary. And then they all came and they sat down, and the gift that they gave me, there was a feeling in my body from my left shoulder to my right foot, and both of them brought me this bow, like an old bow, and laid it across that area in my body. And then the thing to do after the meditation was to interact with plants and plant medicine, that I should do that.
Right.
I do that anyway. Part of my trauma therapy about 2 years ago introduced me to psychedelic medicines, plant medicines and stuff like that as well. So yeah, it was just a wonderful experience, and felt very guarded, very protected, very contained. It all felt really nice. And I was aware of the little noises you were making, kind of just really pleasant kind of or something, I don't know, that picked up, that just really just seemed to, surround the whole atmosphere of the experience. So yeah, that's all I've got, and any feedback you have is welcome.
Beautiful. Yeah, it seems like the images come very naturally to you, and that they're quite psychedelic, that there's archetypal images coming. And so I would say, if you're feeling that sense of feeling very, I think you said guarded or protected, that's a good sign that you can keep going. You certainly don't need to wait for me to come do a guided visualization on a Zoom for you to do this work, as long as you can always return to that place of feeling guarded and protected. And if anything starts to get weird at any time, then you always return to that place. And yeah, that I just wanted to mention that your experience where you are able to kind of see a grandmother come and a grandfather comes is so beautiful. And then some people might not have a visual experience. It might be something that they hear, or they maybe just have a knowing, or it might be just like there are sensations in their bodies, in our bodies, that change. So it's a little different for everyone. I just wanted to let others know that if you didn't have a visual experience like Martin did, that doesn't mean that you're broken, or that it's not working, or that something's wrong in any way. That just shows up differently for everyone. So there's just need to start understanding how your imaginal muscles kind of work, and and then it'll get a little, the more you flex them, the more the stronger the communications can come, or the more confidence you'll have in them. Thank you so much, Martin. I'm so happy that you had such a beautiful experience, and that it seems to be flowing for you.
Yeah, thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Nella.
Thanks, Martin. So Jae Hong is next, and we've got 3 other people, but Nala was really willing to do one more. And so Nala, can I put your email into chat? And so John, Elizabeth, and Bastien can actually contact you directly via email?
You can email me through my website right there, bewellnow.org.
Great.
Yeah, there's and I do have a you can, you know, if you want to chat about working with me and you have questions, I do have an easy way to just book some time to talk with me. Yeah.
And so that link is back into chat again. Thanks, Raj.
Yeah.
So Jae Hong, you're it. And sorry, John, Elizabeth, and Bastien.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Robert. Thank you, Nala. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the beautiful presentation. Very informative and very kind of you. I'm new to this ancestry healing work, so it will probably take some time for me to figure out and put things into places. But I wanted to ask, maybe from another perspective, I feel that on my father's side, my father's sister died like out of cancer early, like quite early ages, and also her husband out of cancer. And so I felt as if that burden of the dead kind of attached to me, this unattached burden. So I think my question will be about where does the burden of the dead stand in the ancestral work, and this message or mission assigned even without our consent? What do we need to do? How can we heal? Do we need to detach from this burden, or do we need to hear the message and pass it over, or just listen? Or this question may be also irrelevant to the healing ancestry work. I don't know. Just wanted to bring this up because I feel as if I'm going through maybe what my father's sister went through, or their kids have been going through. Maybe there's some, you know, injustice they went through that couldn't find a listener, maybe, and a sensitive person, maybe sensitive people pick it up and it attaches to them. That's my interpretation, and kind of I want to maybe help her. I don't know why and how, but I don't know how I can help her, or yeah, I hope my question makes sense.
Yeah, and we can release burdens, and the getting in touch with ancestral guides who are very, very powerful. They're the ones that actually transmit that healing message. So it's not really us that's doing it. We kind of need their help. But like, as I was saying before, they are very ready and very willing to help. So it's more like we make relationship with them. And that is similar to making relationship with living humans. You have to develop some trust with them. And then we ask them to do that kind of heavy lifting of removing of certain burdens on the line, rather than us doing it, right? And there's things that they would ask of us ritually, like they might say, you know, we would like you to go down to the river and sing a song for your, you know, there's certain things that us poor limited humans can do that they might ask us to do. It could be anything. But that kind of feeds into this healing that the wise ones are doing. And that's how you would work with these burdens, as you're calling them, in your lineage. That's how I've been taught to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope
And so
that makes sense.
that's
Yeah.
very, very powerful work, Nala. So before we go and thank Nala profusely before we go. I
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
You're welcome.
I'm glad that so many people were able to come and experience that. And I know that there's probably so many more questions. Maybe we could do something a little bit deeper in the future. And of course, folks can just work with me more deeply.
Yeah,
ongoing.
I have an idea, Nala, but I'm not going to voice it here until I talk to you. So before we go, I'd like to say that if you're able, so we're not an organization, we're just a bunch of people who want to get well and call to parent. If this was moving to you and you're able to donate, the donations cover podcast expenses. There are going to be future podcasts, but this information will be put into chat. So you can donate via PayPal, and there's a direct link there and a message, or through Venmo. So, and if you're able and so moved to, that would be appreciated. Otherwise, it's okay either way. Also, if you have feedback on this podcast, there's a link to go to the website, and it'll take you to a page where you tell that you're feeding back or giving, and there's questions there, and say that you're responding to the Ancestral Healing, Ancestral Trauma podcast. And with that, for sure, Nala, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I actually met a grandmother from long ago. So we'll see how that goes. So thank you for your time. And this will be recorded and put onto the website. And Nala, I'll send you a link to a YouTube if you want to post it on your channel.
Wonderful.
Peace and
All right.
blessings. Thank you so much for your time, Nala.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, Robert.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
you.
I appreciate you too.
Have a beautiful day, everyone, or night, wherever you are.
That's the plan, and you too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.